Thank you, everyone. It's been a few years since I've been to GUADEC, so I'm happy to be back. A little about me first. I realized I haven't been here for a few years. I wanted to reintroduce myself. I actually attended my first GUADEC in Copenhagen in 2001. And then I attended every GUADEC since, until a few years ago when my mother got sick, and I unfortunately lost a few after that. A lot of the time in and around GNOME, I actually spent mostly in and around the GStreamer community. The photo I have here is actually taken of myself and Wim, who's also here at GUADEC in Copenhagen. So he looks slightly younger and less gray. I also joined Red Hat 14 years ago, so I've been with Red Hat for the last 14 years in our display systems team, being the manager for that, which is the team who maintains GNOME, for instance, for Red Hat products. So, why did I decide to do this talk? There was a few things. First of all, internally at Red Hat, we were asked to do this effort to write an AI code assistant using an LLM called Granite that was released by IBM. So that was in some sense my introduction to AI. I had only barely played around with it before then, with AI before then. The project was eventually cancelled due to limitations in the technology. But being part of that project did offer me sort of a rapid front row seat to sort of look at evolution of AI and so on. And I have to say that when we were starting out with using Granite, and this was a time and also I think people were playing around with Llama and so on. It felt like a cute toy, but we wasn't sure whether you will get something useful out of it. And then a bit later, I was pulled into another project where I was introduced to Claude Code. And for me, at least, that was like this sort of landslide moment where I thought, like, okay, this is more than just like a toy. You can actually get something useful out of it. And I could sort of see a lot of use cases. And even then, we have seen rapid evolution and more other things. But at the same time, I think I also learned during this period, right, that AI is not some sort of cure-all in any way or form. It is a tool that a developer can use for various things. And you also need to know how to use it, because if you just sort of ask it a generic request, you are probably going to get crap back. You have to be very specific and all these things. As I was, I guess, working on these things internally at Red Hat, I also felt that there was a shift in the community happening over the last few years, where there was actually quite a hostile environment for any kind of AI tooling, going to a level where I were talking to friends of mine who felt they were getting actively bullied, even by their fellow community members, if they were using AI in any form. In fact, I had a friend of mine ping me just a few days ago who said that he felt that he had been bullied, and he had even tried to bring it up with the Code of Conduct Committee, and they were basically told that the Code of Conduct only protects, people from minority groups, and not people like him, was basically the answer he got. So it's sort of like, having seen this shift, I would like to come here and talk a little bit about it, because I think there is both history and development happening that hopefully can make people at least willing to have a more pragmatic approach towards AI. So I have seen a lot of arguments being made around AI and AI usage. The question of reviewer burden often comes up. Maintainers, of course, being already a scarce resource, are feeling they're drowning in merge requests. And of course, coming from people who then don't often even know what they're submitting. There's also complaints about code quality on some of these merge requests. And there's also people worried about licensing issues. Yeah, I think I will be sort of covering this indirectly afterwards here. So the AI slop, of course, this goes into the whole topic of quality and people just submitting stuff. At least the way I see it, it was originally come out of this thing where you had LLMs producing often really bad code, and then people submitting it without, as I said, knowing what they're submitting. And I can see that, of course, for a maintainer, that creates a very bad experience and a very negative experience. But I think also SLOP has now evolved into this sort of catch-all term where if you don't like AI, you just deem anything in AI does as SLOP. And I think it would be good for us if we, in the GNOME community, try to move the discussion away from, using name calling like SLOP and so on, and talk more about like, hey, what are expectations in terms of code quality and style? And to give an example here, like we had a case not long ago of a one-line patch from a long-term contributor rejected due to AI usage. And that's also despite the contributor clearly stating that they would write the one-line fix in the same way the AI had done it. So to me, this is not protecting against SLOP. This is just making a developer's life more painful. Another thing, of course, I think people need to keep in mind is that what AI has been capable of doing has rapidly evolved. When we started out, right, as I said, my own experience with Llama and Granite, yes, you would get pretty horrendous output usually. But now, if you then look at some of these frontier models, like Claude Opus or Codex and so on, as long as you know what you're asking for, and what you're asking for is sort of limited and direct, you can usually get decent output. And I'm not necessarily saying, hey, rewrite GTK, like that's the sort of task where you get useful output. But if what you're looking for is like, hey, help me find security issues, or help me fix a memory leak or something, you usually actually get a decent enough patch. So once again, it also falls down to, it's not, the problem is not the AI, but the fact that maybe you were trying to ask it too much with maybe too little input. And even if you end up writing all your code by hand, AI can, to this day, be a great research tool, right? It can help you look up values and parameters that you need to rely on. Another thing that I often feel is sort of floating around in discussion is a question of automation, right? And doing fully automated AI builds. And maybe we will get there, but I think from what I've seen in our internal projects, on some level, there's always needs to be a human in the loop, right, to verify what's coming out of it. Because I guess the thing that makes AI weird compared to what you're used to with computers is that it's not necessarily giving a predictable outcome. But I mean, I think there's a lot of little things you could do to also make GNOME developers' life easier. An example I put here is like we could build a service that whenever there's a new GNOME release, it will try to propose a patch to update every extension. So when the extension maintainer logs into the extension site, they will be said, hey, do you want to apply this patch to your code? Or at least it gives them a quick starting point to figure out, okay, this is what changed, and thus keep their extensions more up to date. Another thing I often see is like, oh, it's bad code. I mean, I have used AI myself to write, I guess, some bigger projects where I literally vibe coded the whole thing. And people say, oh, but the code is not so nice. And I'm like, sure, but is not having a tool to do what you need to do better than having one is kind of my answer here, is that, for a lot of these things, we have a situation where there's a solo maintainer maintaining something, so it's not like we have a community of people computing anyway. And in my case, I had this Dell webcam that I was frustrated with, that I could basically not access the features of. And, a long weekend using Claude, I was able to put together an application that replicated all the features of the Windows application for controlling that webcam. Is it like a beautiful application if you look at the code? Probably not. But does it give me an application that didn't exist if it wasn't for AI? Yes, it did. And I think that's the other thing we need to think about here is like, where you apply the code also matters, right? The level of scrutiny you want of anything going into, let's say, glibc or glib or GTK is a lot higher than maybe into your Dell configure application that is you and maybe 50 other people who ever use. And which is also an end-use application, end node, right? So I've seen this growth where some projects also sort of puts in these blanket bans on any kind of AI use. And I think it's also probably bad for GNOME because it's probably going to drive away a lot of new contributors. And Was it one thing I noticed coming here, actually, after not having been to GUADEC for years, is how sparsely attended we are this year. So, you know, students coming out to university today, for them, AI will be part of their education and their tooling from day one. So if you're basically told that, oh, if you want to be in GNOME, you cannot touch anything AI, you're probably just going to lose them before they even start. And I think the other thing to remember is that AI is useful for more things than writing code for a developer, right? Like for my own projects, I use it to help set up the GitLab CI instance for me and configure it for automatic testing and building of both RPMs and Flatpaks. And could I have done that myself? Sure, but it would probably have taken me like, you know, a long weekend sitting reading how-tos and to-dos and figuring out how things worked. Instead, I had Claude do it for me in 10 minutes. And of course, the other thing here is like security issues. I was talking to my good friend Wim, who said that, you know, he had run a full security audit of PipeWire using Opus. And yes, was it painful work? It was, but at the same time, once he had it done, then suddenly CVs started coming in on released versions, and he could say, oh, already fixed it, already fixed it, already fixed it. So once again, it's you know, it doesn't replace you as a developer, but it just speeds you up. And I think also for, you know, people coming into this, you know, having something like AI help you navigate an old legacy C code base might be, you know, the difference between giving up and starting to actually join the community. I think we also need to remember that we can use, like, you know, we have the issue of code coming in huge volumes, but we can also hopefully use AI over time to help us counter that. And I mean, there's been different efforts done by some of the people on my team. Peter Hutter, who maybe many of you know as a lib input maintainer, wrote a tool called Papagei that he uses to interact with his Git instances. Ray Strode, another long-term GNOME contributor, wrote a tool called Git Stage Batch, which basically helps you very quickly put together good Git commit messages. Myself, I tried this tool called Maintainer Buddy, which is a Firefox extension that basically kicks in whenever you are on for instance, you know, your GNOME Git instance, and try to help you more quickly get through patch review and so on. And it will, for instance, if it looks at the ticket and sees that this has not enough information, you can even propose as a script, you can propose back to the user to try to collect the information you need and so on. So I'm not sure that, like, for instance, Maintainer Buddy is the solution. It was an experiment to try to do it, but I think, once again, AI is creating problems in, let's say, volume coming in, but we might also be able to use it to handle that volume. So, yeah, so what I'm saying, getting back to here, right, is that I think we, as a community, need to focus more on what we want to see as opposed to trying to police what developers are doing. And use, you know, the more documentation we put together, which also then is consumable by the AIs themselves, right, will get us better outputs. And to give an example here, KD, for instance, do have a generic policy that they put in place, which of course underscores the things that I think we care about too, right? You know what you commit. And the human has to be 100% certain that they know what they're submitting, they know what it does and how it works. And at the same time, of course, reviewers are more than empowered to say, hey, sorry, this is obviously something you haven't really understood or worked at, and push it back. Well, of course, in GNOME, we don't have a shared policy. Instead, we have like various models with various different models, but overall, I think it often creates a very sort of like, hey, if you think using AI is interesting, don't come to GNOME. That's kind of, I think, the message, unfortunately, we're sending as a community at the moment. Yeah, so, I mean, yeah, this is basically just going further on that. Yeah, so this is, my thing here is like, you know, I'm not saying that, hey, everything goes, but I'm saying, I think taking a more pragmatic approach probably, invites more people into the community. It helps us solve our problems, because, I mean, both in terms of increasing our own productivity, which is a problem. We all know a lot of open source software is under-maintained. And you know, if you don't want to use it for writing code, once again, for research, it's also a great tool. To go back to my webcam app, I basically just had Claude go through the Windows binaries and find me all the USB values that needed to be tweaked in order to, for instance, be able to put that together. And once again, if you have the skill and time, you can do that manually, but you can do it much, much quicker using AI tooling. And I know there's bigger picture issues that people are concerned about, like environmental impact and so on, but I also think that maybe some of those discussions belong maybe in a different forum than GNOME itself. That if you don't like them building data centers in the neighborhood or in your country for even that matter, that's more of a political issue to bring up on a political level than fight about inside the GNOME community. Very few of us decide any of these things. So, I think that's what I wanted to say. Anyone have any questions or comments?
I found it interesting how you refer to how pointing to the GNOME Human Interface Guidelines can help you come up with a more compliant or better UI. And I also think the other way around, how AI can support maybe other disciplines like mine, design, to better understand the technology that we are dealing with, right? Sometimes for me, a repository may be unscrutable. I don't know how it works at all, but now I found, for instance, I have access to GitHub Copilot, so I can ask questions to a repository, and it points me maybe to an icon, maybe to a string, maybe to something that it makes me even more effective in raising a PR. It doesn't mean that I'm going to fix it myself. Sometimes I could if it's small enough and I feel confident enough in making that contribution. But I also wonder how AI can help contributors, again, that are maybe not as technical, to give a better bug report, perhaps create a better bug report. And I wonder if we're considering also how precisely we can lower the barrier of entry, not only for junior developers, but also for junior or not so junior professionals or contributors from different disciplines.
Yeah, okay, I'm not sure I 100% understood your question, but I do agree that, right, the more documentation like this that, for instance, the project has available. Let's say, for instance, you want to submit a patch or something to GTK. If there is a file that sort of specifies this is how GTK wants its bug reports, then you can tell, Claude or Codex or whatever you're using, saying, hey, can you help me format the bug report using these guidelines from this document, right? And then hopefully that, once again, reduces the burden on the maintainer, because the AI makes sure that you include everything you need in your bug report. And I think it's useful in the domains. I have, on my team, I have 2 blind developers, and one thing they are working on at the moment is trying to use AI tooling to basically make GNOME fully voice controllable. And I think just due to the scope of it, that wasn't even viable without AI, but now they have a chance of actually getting to a point where they can more easily use their system, thanks to this.
Thank you.
Do you have any opinions on the potential upcoming legal battles with models that are trained on open source code that that have explicit GPL or various licenses that then generate output, and that may be down the road determined to be in violation because they don't output the same license on their generated code? That area. Do you have any opinion in that space?
Yeah, I think my general thinking there is different models vary in quality and how they operate. I feel that often people can sort of get hung up on potential legal issues, but it sort of becomes a what-if game. And I think until there actually are lawsuits that clarifies it, it sort of becomes us just sort of sitting speculating, oh, what if it is and what if that? I mean, at the end of the day, to some degree, in my opinion, AI does exactly what a human would do, right? It reads existing code, takes lessons for it, and then spits out new code. And obviously, of course, what you have read informs what you write, but that doesn't make it a copyright violation that you write code just because you learn from some other code. So if I were to make a wild guess, that will probably over time be where the courts also land on this, if it ever becomes court cases where of course, if it's sort of obviously verbatim copying being done, that's a different thing, but Once again, learning from existing code has never been illegal, and I don't think it should become illegal either.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Now, I just wanted to follow up on the design thing, right? So non-developers roles, right? So of course, this also includes documentation, translation, right? And AI can be like great in like maybe replacing some of the roles or augmenting them. And so this is exactly what's happening now, you know, in like technical writing, for example, in localization, right? But the problem is that it also creates a gap between those who are like AI enabled. For example, they have access to subscriptions to AI tools through their employer, and the rest of the world who might not be enabled, right? And so, for example, if you take translators, they can, if you work for a company that enables you for AI, you run some AI tools, you know, you translate everything in a fraction of a moment, and you are done. And then you have the rest of the world who need to translate everything manually, you know. So obviously that creates a huge gap, you know, time-wise, effort-wise, and otherwise. So if we don't have access to open tools and open infrastructure, you know, this gap will only become bigger and bigger in time. I think that's an ongoing issue.
No, I mean, of course, that's not a new problem per se. I mean, like, you know, people could afford hardware versus those who couldn't is like a long-standing issue. I do believe that, you know, we had you can say in the early days, we had a lot of the local models that people are using, and then, of course, at the moment, I feel that the frontier models, like the open source is the leading thing. As things mature, I believe that at least a good chunk of use cases will probably move back to local models just because it's cheaper and easier, and they are still being developed, so hopefully that will help alleviate it. And of course also, as new technology like hardware comes out, hopefully we can also bring down the price of using these AI tools so that they become more widely accessible. But yeah, I agree it's a problem, but it's not a new problem because, like, once again, you know, poor people couldn't necessarily afford a $2,000 computer.
My question is more about probably to the room, to the community. How are we gonna want to deal with this? Because sometimes it's the elephant in the room where, you know, most of us working from companies who are pushing to use these technologies, and we end up gonna use these tools in projects in GNOME, which in some cases are actually disallowing, you know, want to disallow the usage of these technologies. So there are already some maintainers who are clear statements about this. Do we want to have a GNOME position on the topic? Do we want to have just leave the maintainers to rule on this? To have I don't know. It's because this is gonna be like something which is gonna hit everybody, and these are tools which anybody's gonna.
Yeah. I mean, of course, in GNOME we have a long history of leaving things to maintainers, right? So I guess that's a core part of our culture. So I have been sort of trying to draft these kind of suggestions for some sort of guidelines, but I think that's maybe more what GNOME could publish is here's our general guidelines for what we think maintainers should do. But I'm not sure we're ready for, or should be ready for, maybe even having like, and here's the rules coming down from the GNOME Foundation on how you react to these things. But I think maybe in terms of also just how we are perceived as community, having guidelines in place that, you know, takes a pragmatic approach helps balance the impression from maybe some sub-projects being very strict about what they're doing. But I mean, I'm sure over time there's going to sooner or later come up like a hard conflict here, right? Like, what if someone takes a library in GNOME, forks it, adds a lot of features with the aid of AI, and then comes back saying, okay, I want GNOME now to switch to my version instead. And when that day comes, of course, then things like, you know, I'm sure there will be a lot of strain in community figuring how to balance this. But at the same time, I think with every new technology coming in, over time they become normalized in some sense, right? And people get over it and then sort of just accept, okay, this is how it is, and the controversy level goes down. So hopefully that will happen here too.
Thank you very much. We don't have time for other questions, but you're going to have Christian here at the venue for the rest of the day. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.